Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I have Dr. Kelly Hogan with us to kick off this seminar.
Hi, Jamie, thanks. Good afternoon, and welcome to one of our educational sessions for the virtual Iowa Pork Congress. I'm Dr. Kelly Hogan. I'll be introducing the session today, and we're really glad that you're here to have joined us. As you can see, the 49th Annual Iowa Pork Congress looks a little bit different this year, as in-person events have been limited, resulting in the educational seminars and Iowa Pork Foundation auction going into a virtual format. While the shift in events is kind of a disappointment, the IPPA Board of Directors used the core We Care values to make decisions to keep the whole community safer as the nation works through this coronavirus pandemic. Even with these changes, you can still connect with vendors, attend seminars, and support the scholarship program. If you're interested in other seminars, the auction, swine product spotlights, and more, just log on to www.iowapork.org for a complete schedule and to register. Our first order of business is about the technology we're using today. To make this a little bit easier for all of us who have joined, we've taken care of some of the details for you. You're in a listen-only mode, which means we've muted your microphones for you. Chances are that you'll have some questions for our speakers, and your questions are completely welcomed. Just type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom window, and we'll make sure that the speaker takes some time to answer them for you. Now, before we see the feature presentation, I'd like to take a moment to share some information about Boehringer Ingelheim and the swine team's new product offering, Farmera, as a sponsor of this session. I'm going to share my screen now. So as I mentioned, excuse me. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Kelly Hogan. I'm the technical manager for the integrated health management team at Boehringer Ingelheim. And I'm going to give you a little taste of one of our new products that we're really excited about today. As for BI, you might be familiar with us being #2 animal health in the world and a global leader in disease prevention, vaccines, parasiticides. But we recognize that the world and the industry has changed, and so has BI. And so we've developed a new business unit that will help us focus solely on digital technologies. The swine industry really has changed considerably over the past, let's say, 25, 30 years. We've gone from single site to 3-site. There's been a lot of industry consolidation, specific pathogen-free herds. And what we've done is we've really responded and tried to support the industry in moving from this concept of focusing on treatment to prevention with vaccines. But with science and research moving forward with early detection and all these biosecurity improvements, we have to look forward to what's next. And we recognize that the evolution of the swine industry is going to continue. We also recognize that challenges are going to persist. This consolidation and increased geographic diversity, most farms are not particularly well connected as far as data is concerned. There's labor shortages, and then we also have some of the more prominent issues that we've dealt with, African swine fever and the impact of COVID-19. And as we enter this new kind of new world, brave new world, so to speak, we really believe that an ecosystem approach is going to be critically important to an integrated health management platform. And we want to go beyond prevention. We want to go to prediction. We know that when we're trying to look at production data in commercial swine industry, it's often a black box from placement to first market. And that information that we get is a little bit difficult to associate. It's tough to aggregate it. We have a hard time seeing clear associations between daily events and performance impacts, and then being able to make quick decisions based on that information. We often find that the analysis and actionable information has to go through a ton of different channels just to get to the right decision maker. So we created Farmera, and Farmera is a new digital platform, both mobile and web-based. It's developed by Boehringer Ingelheim Animal Health. And this allows for the digital aggregation of all your pig production data. So your inventory management, mortality tracking, treatments, sow source, and we even have some sensor integrations that are really very exciting for those people that either have a smart barn, so to speak, or barns that have kind of ad hoc sensors added to them. It provides an at-a-glance supervisor overview of all the sites that are under that supervisor's care, so they can see everything that they are in charge of from their kitchen table if they need to. We also have graphical information, representation of the information, and we're also the sole provider of the SoundTalks in-barn real-time cough monitoring data in the United States. I'm not going to talk about that today, but we'd be happy to have a discussion about it at some point. But why are we jumping into this digital space? We believe that with 25 years of swine industry health and experience, and our swine-focused veterinarians, that we really are the right people for the job for this. We've started developing strategic partnerships throughout animal health to support this ecosystem approach. We have data analytics and support in-house, and we also have really our own little development team that's working on this in an incubator type development team. And we have a reputation for premium products, so we're very excited to bring this to you, and we're very excited about what it could look like. Now I'd really like to show you a little video, and hopefully this works and isn't too laggy. We hope you enjoyed that video about our new product, Farmera. I hope that you'll reach out to your BI representative or myself to learn more about this new product. We're really excited about it, and we'd love to have a conversation about it. But now on to what you came here to see. Damian Mason is an agriculturalist. He's spoken to audiences in all 50 states, 5 Canadian provinces, and 7 foreign countries. Damian joins us for a discussion about trends and issues impacting the future of food and agriculture. Please watch this, then welcome Damian Mason.
America's economic greatness started with America's agricultural greatness. Today, food is more abundant, safer, and available in greater variety than at any other time throughout human history.
Damian Mason is a mixture of farm boy, talk show host, agricultural economist, and businessman. Damian produces and hosts the Business of Agriculture podcast and the Do Business Better podcast. Damian speaks and writes about the 2 topics he knows best, business and agriculture. His latest published books are Do Business Better and Food Fear. Please welcome Damian Mason.
Greetings and thanks for having me here at the Iowa Pork Congress 2021. Thank you, Kelly Hogan, and most importantly, thank you, Berkshire Ingelheim, for being a sponsor, which means that I could be here remotely, unfortunately, because we would have a lot more fun if we were there in person. I have been with you before. That wonderful gentleman named Tyler Bettine brought me to Des Moines about 4, 5, 6 years ago, so I was with you. I've worked with a number of Iowa pork producers over the years. You might remember, in case you don't remember me, I'm the agriculture because starvation sucks guy. I'm the guy that's constantly reminding folks that if you eat it, drink it, or smoke it, agriculture produced it. So interesting, by the way, as marijuana becomes more and more of a crop, these stickers are flying off the shelf. But anyway, I'm here for you because for the next little bit of time we have together, we're going to talk about something that we are all very excited about, something that we do every day. We talk about the business of agriculture. I'm going to share with you outlook perspectives. You were teased to join this call that we're going to talk about the F words of agriculture. We're talking about food and farming and the finances and the fights that we deal with, as well as the futures. We're going to talk about insights, outlook. I'm going to give you some of my thoughts on these things. And I don't mind if you disagree with any of my opinions. Just realize that anything that I share with you from a factual or a data point, I can absolutely verify and give you the documentation and where I've found it. So I don't mind, disagreement is healthy, even though some don't think so. Don't mind if you disagree on some of my concepts or outlooks, but do realize that anything I share with you from a factual or data standpoint can be verified. So Jamie asked me to be here and to get into this. So we will take questions because I want this to be interactive to make this fun. If we were all there in person at Des Moines, half you'd be hung over last night. You would have been out with the Berkshire Ingelheim people trying to get in their pocketbook, hey man, I buy a bunch of your stuff. Get me 6 more drinks. Well, anyway, as is, we're all just here on this big happy Zoom call. Let's talk about from the very beginning, the business of agriculture. This is something that we know, and I'm just going to start there because we get it, but we sometimes forget it. Somebody's mic is on. Let's take care of that. Okay. So the business of agriculture is the world's most important industry, is the foundation of all societal advance. There would be no architecture were there not first agriculture. As I always say, the cobbler couldn't make shoes for somebody else until somebody made food for the cobbler. So everything that we have in the way of our economy and our growth is directly attributable to a foundation in a successful agrarian sector. So that being said, we are so good at what we do that the rest of the people that we feed sometimes just take it for granted, and we know that. So we're going to cover all of that from a bigger perspective, and I'll connect some dots as it pertains to our industry. As you may recall from our time together, and I've worked for the National Pork Producers Council, I've worked for the National Pork Board, and I've also worked for you. So some of you and I have met before, and I've also been out there to Washington County, Iowa's pork producingest county, I believe, where I was working because of the good people with Brenham and Pork. I'm a farm guy. I'm not a pork guy. I showed pigs in 4-H, but I was raised on a dairy farm, your basic Midwestern dairy farm, like there was on every county road in northern Indiana when I was a kid. We milked 60 cows, farmed about 500 acres. Most of it was rented. Your basic Midwestern dairy farm. I was in 4-H for 10 years, FFA, all that kind of thing. I was going to become an agronomist. Got to Purdue University because I loved soil judging and FFA, and I was so into this. And I got to Purdue and they handed me a biochemistry book, and I said, maybe we'll be an ag economist instead of an agronomist. That's me in 1981 as a 12-year-old boy with my grand champion brown Swiss dairy cow. As I have to point out, in 1981, she happened to be the only brown Swiss dairy cow at the Huntington County 4-H fair. But as we say, if you can't beat them, find a more obscure breed, a breed that maybe doesn't even make functional sense. By the way, pork people, is it by coincidence that all of the foodies and all the restaurants are bringing in Berkshires? Someone asked me not too long ago, a couple years ago, Damian, what's Berkshire pork? I said, a breed of hogs that we got away from because they didn't hold up well in modern production facilities. Speaking of breeds, for 13 years, I had an all-natural beef operation. That's a picture of me with my steers. I haven't done that for the last year or two because I decided, you know what, I had other business things that were a little bit more profitable than my hobby beef operation. But yes, I did sell all-natural beef. As I always point out, I have no idea what that means. I just charge more for it. All natural actually has no definition, as opposed to local per the USDA. When you see the people talking about, is it local? Is my food local? Local is within 400 miles. So how local is that? And as I always point out, speaking of breeds, I do raise black Angus steers, or I did, because everybody knows based on the Angus beef program that the consumer believes it must be a black Angus, otherwise they might as well be ingesting a German Shepherd, right? So as I always tell everyone, I'm a great salesman, an average beef producer. I would oversell my inventory every year. I had 20 steers to sell. I'd sell 22. I'd have to go to several of my customers and get what I'd call, from scraps from my friends in the dairy business, hybrid black and white Angus. So I'm a dairy guy, I'm an ag guy, I've got a degree in agricultural economics from Purdue University. I don't do that rah-rah stuff, so let's not get into Iowa State versus Purdue. Frankly, you know what? They're all good places. As long as we're not going to in any way, shape, or form say anything positive about Ohio State, I think we can all agree. Thank you very much. I know you're laughing right now at home. I got into this business of speaking, consulting, writing, etc., because in 26 years ago, almost 27 years ago now, I quit my corporate job. I used to be a sales rep. I quit my job to become a political comedian. And some of you might remember my story about that. But I quit my job in sales. I quit corporate to become a political comedian. My comedy act was actually pretty unique. I would dress up as Bill Clinton and deliver a current event comedy show in the persona of Bill Clinton. I'm telling you this, but well, first off, I don't need to tell you. I can show you. That's me as Bill Clinton. And yeah, I can talk just like Bill Clinton. I can say, yeah, I had the same voice as Bill Clinton through years and years of not inhaling. Pass me a doobie. All right. Why am I telling you this? Because comedy is easy to explain, very hard to do successfully. Not giving myself pats on the back, just telling you that it's a difficult business to be successful in, and I was successful in it. And the reason I was successful in it is a couple of things. First off, I understood from its very beginnings what comedy is. Comedy is observation with a point of view and perspective delivered with a punchline. Observation, point of view, perspective, punchline. That's it. Easy to explain, hard to execute. We all know people who think they're funny. Are they? And more importantly, could they do it professionally? But here's the thing. Comedy begins with the observation, and then you put the perspective on it. So the reason I'm telling you this is all those years of doing political comedy taught me to be an observer of everything, to watch everything, to read different papers, to watch human behavior, to pay attention to what goes on in Washington, D.C., to pay attention to how these things are all interconnected, and then to put my perspective on it. So the time that we have together today, I'm going to deliver you my observations with my perspective, and there might be an occasional punchline, but there'll be more importantly, a point today. So it's observation, perspective, and point versus as many punchlines today. But I gave you that because I wanted you to understand comedy and what it taught me and what it can teach you. Be an observer. Now, there's another thing that comedy taught me, that if there's no audience, there is no need for me. If there's not a paying customer, there was no need for my show. You can be funny all day long, hanging out on your couch, but if there ain't nobody paying you and you don't have an audience, it's not a business, right? It's the same thing for all businesses. If there's not a customer, if there's not an audience, there's no need for your product. And we in agriculture have gotten so, for the years, caught up in production, we sometimes forget that. So I'm going to remind you that we in agriculture all work for customers. Increasingly, we aren't as vital to them. Sure, we are. They couldn't live without us. But this whole thing of if you ate today, thank a farmer is a mindset that we really need to get away from. And I'll tell you why. We're not in a situation of scarcity anymore in places like the United States of America. For 10,000 years, that's how long agriculture has been around. And it's an amazing business, isn't it? 10,000 years. The foundation of human involvement, everything that we've done is because of agriculture. But for 9,900 of those years, we were hanging around in like loincloths, trying to eat some berries, hoping they weren't poisonous. 10,000 years ago, we said, there's got to be a better way. So we started cultivating crops and domesticating livestock, and we were eating better. Because of that, it allowed urbanization, education, all the things that modern society is. But for 9,900 of those 10,000 years, agriculture still was mostly defined by scarcity. The kings and queens ate very well, but the feudal system of serfs and peasants, they were starving still, eating potatoes and gruel. For 9,900 years, we essentially had scarcity and not as much production as we would have liked. That's why kids were littler and we didn't have fat people, and there was, wars over things, and potato famine would wipe out significant parts of the population. In places like North America, that's not been the case for the last 100 years. 100 years ago, we hybridized corn. We started getting really good at crop production. We got really good at using chemistry and machinery to make more stuff. Our farms went from having 5 pigs per litter to 12. Think of all the things that we have done in the last 100 years. And our consumer is not mad or bad to us. They simply are doing what all of us do. Just like you have a cell phone in your pocket, or you maybe even are watching this on your smartphone, you expect more than you did when you were 20, 30, 40 years ago. You expect that smartphone is going to allow you to watch video like this right here. You expect that it's going to be connected. It's going to have 5G. It's going to be fast. You're going to be able to do your work. That's our consumer. They expect there's going to be an abundance of food because there always has been, at least in modern times. So our consumer, instead of being told they should thank us, we should probably change our thinking to, thank you, consumer, for still buying pork. For buying 52 pounds of pork last year, we thank you. For being discerning, we understand. We're all discerning customers now. Look at the pickup truck you have. It has every feature, bell and whistle, that you couldn't have even gotten on your 1971 pickup truck. My wife has a 71 Cheyenne Collector, and everybody says, that sure is neat. Bet you love that. They don't make them like they used to. And I said, no, they make them a hell of a lot better than they used to. My F-150 can outpull this, outhaul this. It's got heated seats, for crying out loud. It's very important when you winter in Arizona to have heated seats. It was down to 35 this morning. The point is, we all expect more. Our consumers expect more. So I'm giving you this lay of the land. I'm sorry if it sounds as though I'm harping on it, but I want us to understand it's not just a matter of thank us because we produced a hog today. More and more, the consumer can be discerning, like we all can, and expect more. Our consumers in places like the United States and Canada expect more, expect a variety, expect value added, expect a story that comes with their food. That's why they're not basic level commodity consumers anymore. Being a comedian, especially a political comedian, also taught me to pay attention to what goes on there in Washington, D.C., or in Ottawa, or in any of the ruling capitals around the earth. So when I talk to you about some things I see and some predictions I'm going to make, I want you to realize that I'm going from a ag farm boy background that understands the business, looking at the consumer marketplace, because I travel, or used to travel, a couple hundred days a year, 150 days a year. I would be around these consumers, and I live half the year in Paradise Valley, Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm around these consumers. So all the predictions we're going to talk about are either about consumer marketplace or agricultural impacted by government. Let's talk about when I look at the future. When I look at the future, some of these things you're probably going to say, oh, of course. And some of you are going to say, ooh, I don't know if I like that. I see half the number of farmers 10 years from now. In fact, I've been saying this for a couple of years. So you'd say half the farmers in about 7 or 8 years. There's a reason why I actually am going to back off on that. First off, commodity production favors scale and size. There are 3.2 to 3.4 million farmers in the United States of America right now. However, 58% of the farms that they operate do not sell $10,000 worth of product per year. So now, to our friends in suburbia, they might think that's cute. Oh, I like to buy my vegetables from this man that's out in the country, and he takes backyard chickens and fertilizes organic arugula. Well, that's cute. how many pounds of arugula does he actually sell per year? Oh, me and like 2 other customers. The point is, farming of scale, as we all know, is still a commodity game, and it favors size and scale. So when I say half the farmers, I'm talking about those at the major production level, where 5,000 acres is going to maybe become 10,000 acres. Hogs have already become integrated, so it's a little bit different, but we're going to see this again and again and again. One point that I'd like you to, if you're writing down any notes, 105,453. 105,453. That's the number of farms that produced 75% of our country's crop revenue in the year 2017 per the ag census. So 105,000 out of 2 million farms with 3.4 million farmers on the 2 million farms produced 75% of the stuff. So we're going to still have a lot of farmers, small niche players, farmers on paper only, people like me in my hobby beef operation, although I actually have some hay and some other entities that I'm involved with as well. I even sell some timber sometimes. Small entities, tax write-off farms, et cetera. But farmers of consequence where a lot of our food is produced are going to continue to get bigger and fewer in between. When I look at the future, I see more contractual production arrangements. Now, this has been going on since the 90s when hogs hit 7 cents a pound and you guys couldn't justify hauling them to market for the price you were getting. We saw a lot of independent players obviously exit the market, and we saw a contractual vertically integrated business system come into the hog industry. It happened in poultry prior to pork. In the 1970s, we used to have a lot of independent poultry and egg producers. Generally, unless it's small, niche, and fits a category, and even much of that niche category is occupied now vertically integrated poultry. It's the same thing in poultry and pork. I believe it's going to happen in many things because of the cost of capital, because right now land is not going down in value. Interest rates and the fact that there's inflationary pressure based on government spending is going to keep the cost of entry into agriculture pretty high. So I believe we're going to see more contractual production. Dairy is a very obvious next step because of the huge amounts of capital and because of the price flux, maybe even beef, perhaps even row crops. Specialty crops in many ways are already contractually produced. So we're going to see a continual growth in contractual production arrangements per my prediction. With the contractual arrangement, there's going to be also more corporate oversight or even regulation on how we do what we do out here in the middle of the country. In the Iowas of the world, you're going to see more and more corporate influence or even dictates on how we do what we do. Let's just say, which I'm sure you already have. If your biggest customer is Tyson through your hog production system, Tyson says, we're selling these all to Kroger, and Kroger insists that the hogs are raised this way by this standard, et cetera, et cetera. Saw the thing with poultry, of course, now where we're not just preemptively giving antibiotics in the drip lines in the poultry barns. But what if it's not just antibiotics? We've gotten more judicious with antibiotics, and that's generally a good thing. But what if it's also how you hire, who you hire, what you pay your help, your environmental practices, not even just on how you handle your manure that might be managed and surely is managed by the Iowa Department of Environmental Management, but also how you crop your land, cover crops, the amount of diesel you can use per acre. What if these are things moving forward that our customers insist that we do so that they can appease ag's customers, ultimately those people sitting at the table that we talked about earlier? I believe we will see this. In the Wall Street Journal last week, there was this article that says, companies get ready for new ESG rules. ESG, as on my slide right there, environmental, social, and governance. More companies want to be a part of this so they can go out to the marketplace and tout that they comply with very rigid standards on how they interact with their people, the social aspect of things, how their companies are run, and their environmental consciousness. Real quickly, just if you want to know where this is going, this article states that 10 years ago, 20% of the S&P 500 companies, 20% of the S&P 500 voluntarily produced sustainability reports. Last year, it was 90%. So we obviously are seeing this, and from the top bottom is going to impact how we produce. This is nothing necessarily bad or good. It's just going to be your license to sell. If you want to play, if you want to have the contract, if you want to do business, many of the people we sell to are going to demand that we adhere to certain standards or that we publicize and we show the customer what we're doing out here. As I look at the future, I see a continual increase of government in agriculture. Now, this comes on the heels of the year 2020 when we set a record. $51 billion of federal monies were thrown at the ag sector. Of course, we threw trillions at everything, so it's hardly unique that ag got all this money. The federal government threw money at everything, in the year 2020. But it's kind of like when you're the screwed up kid and dad gives you money. With that money comes a lot of conditions like, hey, son, you're screwed up. Now that I'm paying for things, you're going to actually wake up. Now that I'm paying things, you're going to get your hair cut. Anyway, we're a little bit in that regard also now when we're taking the government's money, which we've always been a bit under the thumb through USDA policies and through EPA policies. I see this, unfortunately, not getting any easier. I see it getting perhaps worse. We're going to continue to probably have some government monies thrown at us, but it'll be with conditions. I see things like cropping systems, less so now on subsidies because we're at $5 corn and $13 beans, but we are going to see it perhaps on some environmental compliance, things like waters of the United States coming back, but we'll get carbon release, tillage. These are the things that I see happening as we go down the road. I also believe we better brace for government activism, not just USDA programs, not just working with the FSA or NRCS, those things that we always do. But when you've got certain politicians, like, for instance, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and we're not taking a side, again, I'm just giving you a lay of the land, who came out and had a big town hall and talked about how cow farts were degrading the environment and we should have stipulations on how many cheeseburgers we are allowed to eat. These are real things. This is a real congresswoman who has real influence, and the media does tend to pick up her press releases and her statements. We're going to see pressure in ag on dietary guidelines or even, dare I say, restrictions. Bill de Blasio, the governor of New York, instituted Meatless Mondays. The schools, all the 1 million kids, if they were going to school, which right now I think they're virtual, if they were attending school, would not be allowed to have meat on Mondays in New York's public schools. So these are government activist sort of approaches because of either dietary or environmental or social consciousness causes. We're going to see more of this. One thing that's going to impact a lot of people on this call isn't just the dietary guidelines, which starting in 2015 said there should be less meat consumed, even though that flies in the face of what our consumers want. The more affluent a consumer becomes, the more they want protein of an animal source, at least right now. But there are restrictions on that, or at least proposed restrictions. There's also wages. Biden has sworn that we're going to have $15 minimum wage. I don't know what you pay some of your base level people, but in livestock production, we use a lot of labor, less than we used to probably per pound produced, but we still use a lot of it. The man who milks my cows, that rents my farmland, starts his milkers at about $13 plus housing. So if minimum wage goes from $7.25 to $15, that's more than a doubling. Does that mean the rest of us are doubling our wage? Does $13 plus housing become $26 plus housing? And if so, what does that do to us? It either means that we've got inflationary pressure and the minimum wage simply put in a price floor, or it means that we're going to go broke, or it means that there's some other outcome that I haven't quite figured out. Either food prices go up, inflation is here to reign, or we go out of business. So I am concerned about some of the government activism, and those are the three things, particularly environmental impact on us, meaning from a regulatory, dietary restrictions, or so we say regulations, and then of course the employment and wages. I'm gonna move on now. We promised we would take any questions. Remember, I'm an observer first with an ag econ degree and a farm background. So I don't mind if you disagree with me, but also realize that I do have pretty good research on the commentary that I'm delivering. Chad Meyer raised his hand. I don't know how to call on him. Jamie, can we call on Chad?
We cannot call on Chad. Chad needs to type his question into the Q&A box, but we do have somebody who typed in here, it sounds like you believe there will be no place for the independent producer. What needs to happen to change that trend?
Yeah, and please do not get mad at me. We know that right now, and I am not a hog expert, nor am I a marketing expert. It's my understanding we're having a hard time even getting price discovery based on the lack of a spot market or an independent market right now for hog production. So that tells me that obviously the vertically integrated hog production system dominates, and certainly most of the pork produced is going that way. If you are an independent, it seems to me that the option is going to be niche and story, meaning that you use that to your advantage and say, well, commodity production is continuing to go more and more to where the independent person is being shut out, or the independent person can't get the long-term contract, or the independent person has a more difficult time navigating through the fluctuations, which can be pretty unsettling, especially like last year, or even access to processing, which we saw when we had the plants shutting down because of COVID. So if it were me and I were a independent producer, assuming that you're not as of scale as some of the vertically integrated, probably the option is to begin transitioning more and more into small and niche. I did record a podcast about 3 to 4 months ago with someone that was starting a smaller processing plant, meaning not 600 employees, but like 40 employees. This might be the option where the smaller independent is going to have to maybe even handle their own processing. So they become integrated, but on a smaller scale or on a cooperative, or selling niche and story. We bring in Poland Chinas and breed them to Tamworths, and they're petted by my daughter, and they're blessed by a priest. And anyway, I'm exaggerating, but the point is you could sell the story a little bit more. Anybody else?
Yeah. A question, how do producers get paid for the ESG proposals you foresee coming down the pike?
Well, you can obviously demand that. You say, all right, Walmart, you want to be able to tell your customers, Walmart wants to be able to put on the shelf, this pork was raised adhering to these standards, blah, 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 blah. Now, some of that has always been there. There's always been a bit of a premium. If you go to Whole Foods, which of course I don't, but I go there just to do my research, Whole Foods has always had a thing where it was like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. And by tier 1 means that you're not using gestation crates, and tier 2 means that you are making sure that they don't have any animal byproducts in their food. And by the time you get to tier 4, you name them all and stroke their belly at night and all this kind of stuff. And they did allegedly pay a premium for production methods that they then could sell on at a premium. Because if you bought tier 4 meat at Whole Foods, it cost considerably more than tier 1. That's one option. Unfortunately, the power of the packer and the retailer is generally that they beat you over the head with these things and say, in order to sell to us, in other words, to even have us as a market, you're going to do this sort of ESG compliance. Generally, it's been a little bit of both. Again, the Whole Foods and the more niche carriers have thrown a little premium on there because they know your productivity and efficiency is less. But also there's been a thing where, let's use Kroger and cage-free eggs. Kroger a few years ago felt the pressure, or as we'd say in football, heard the footsteps. And Kroger said, all of our eggs starting by, I think it was this year or next year, it was a few years ago. So they said in the next 4 years, all of our eggs are going to be cage-free, whatever. McDonald's did the same thing. So just take any of the large users of our product. And they stipulated by the year 2023, all of our eggs are going to be cage-free. So a bunch of the industry said, crap, we got no choice. If we're going to sell our eggs, I guess we got to get rid of the pins and do it, which of course there's no such thing as a cage-free hen anyhow. I mean, at some point it's contained. Otherwise it's just run around out in the back 40, right? Anyway, these things sometimes are dictated over time and say, then the industry essentially has to react just to have the ability to sell to the marketplace. Don't necessarily approve of it. We see it all the time. Cage-free eggs is your great example. We good?
We actually have one more question in here, but I also have one I kind of want to throw in there that stays in the topic of the ESG and those kind of environmental and social license to operate. So obviously pork producers have invested and are very interested in caring for the environment, right? And being good stewards of the environment. It's a piece of our We Care principles that we put a lot of emphasis on. And one of and we certainly want to be a part of improving the environmental quality in Iowa and also the US. But one of the things we struggle with is a uniform definition of sustainability.
Well, you're beating me to my own slides, so thank you, and we'll get to that. And by the way, please, I never said that you weren't doing a good job with any of these things. Simply stating that the marketplace wants to be able to sell it more because, again, they know that consumer has had enough food, is discerning, and will demand more and more of this. Actually, it's a good time to hop in there right now. Pulled up a couple of different things for our research. Now, granted, this is beef. I know that you guys are the pork industry. This is from beef, but since they're in the animal protein business, this is an article from October 29th, so pretty recent. And it talked about research on the consumer. And one thing that I pulled up because I wanted to share with you, Millennial and Gen Z. So I think to be a millennial, you're talking about someone that's right now roughly about 40 to 25, I think, would be a person that would be defined as a millennial. And Gen Z is the generation after them. So say the kids that are in high school to college right now, roughly into their mid 20s. Millennial and Gen Zs are focused on the environment and animal care. So again, that would be ESG, environmental and social, as well as the nutrition of the animal plus their own nutrition. In fact, millennial moms, dig this, millennial moms represent $200 billion in spending, $200 billion in spending power, and 86% of them are willing to pay more for a product that offers full transparency. Now, whether that money trickles back to you or is absorbed at the retail and processor level is the fight that we always have in crop production and in animal production. But you've got a pretty vast amount. Remember, the millennial populace is as great in terms of number as the baby boomers. I'm the one at Gen X here that was sort of the little generation. We're the not very many of us latchkey kids who get screwed. Nobody talks about us. The baby boomers are starting to die off. So millennials are who are being coveted by marketers. Also, a new term surfacing, and I want to share this with you. New term surfacing, ethically sourced. Ethically sourced. It's a new term that this researcher upon beef was talking about. So I think we're going to see more of this. And just finding sustainability, I'm with you, and I'll get to that here in a minute. Okay, we better move on now. Yeah, we got another one?
Actually, yeah. So not related to sustainability. And another one that just popped in. So tell me if we don't have time. But do you predict live production of livestock being moved overseas, like Brazil, Mexico, et cetera, and the U.S. only processes harvested meat?
That might happen. And do I have a big prediction on it? Let me share this with you. There's a big article. Obviously, I'm a consumer of information. I try to bring you essentially my book reports because I'm flying around and doing what I do. You're busy making food. So I'm going to bring you the consolidated book report. Big article this last fall to winter was about how Europe had essentially just offshored everything that they disagreed with. European Union said, oh yeah, we still want farms, but we want farms that do this. And we don't want those nasty GMOs. Why they really didn't want GMOs, they tried to pretend it was because of a safety issue, is because Bayer and BASF did not have genetically modified organism technology, nor did Syngenta. Syngenta was Swiss-based. Bayer and BASF are German-based. So they were saying it was because of safety, but it was really because they were protecting 3 European companies. On the grounds of environmentalism, they say we want farms, we want small farms, we want farms of a certain caliber. But you know what we don't want? We don't want this, this, and this. So they'll gladly buy that stuff from Brazil. So there tends to be a thing, to answer your question, among affluent developed countries like the United States or Europe, where things that we don't like to see, we think they're kind of stinky, they're kind of nasty, we'll gladly still use the stuff. We'll just offshore its production, right? Textiles. We don't like the idea that 11-year-old kids are working at a textile mill in South Carolina. But you know what? If it's happening in Bangladesh, I want my cheap t-shirt. Not being mean, these are things that really happen because of the economics of global trade. Do I see this happening? Brazil obviously can produce lots and lots of crop. The old thing you got told when you went to the land auction, better buy that farm ground, ain't making any more of it. It's not actually true. We're making the hell out of farm ground in Brazil. We're plowing up prairie and putting in more cropland. So will we get to that point? The economics, of course, are going to weigh on that. The transportation, there's still a big opportunity to go with this stuff is produced locally. There's still the big opportunity to talk about ag as national defense. One of the things I harp on all the time. Yeah, we don't need those factories that make that nasty old, we don't need Neenah, Wisconsin. They make manhole covers. Yeah, we don't like those foundries. Be nice, just let that all happen over in India and China. Yeah, great. Until you need a manhole cover, and then all of a sudden you're in a trade war. So I think if we use national defense, we still have an opportunity on that. The multinational companies, the big four, probably would not be opposed to what you just talked about, which it means moving offshore for greater efficiency. So will it happen? It's going to probably more like the European thing where if it's ugly and nasty, but I think our biggest thing is, no, we want American owned, we want American processed, and we also want it from a means of national defense so that we don't have to be reliant. For the next 10 years, we can rattle the heck out of our saber about, look what happened during the coronavirus shutdown. Do you want to have this happen when all of a sudden Brazil gets mad at us? So that's probably why it won't happen as soon as possible.
One more, or tell me to table it and move on.
Okay. Oh, we're tabling that one? Okay. Well, all right. Hey, we're having a good time. Let's face it, guys. I'm sitting in my office studio, and I was going to be there in real time. I told Jamie I'm not opposed to going a little long if we're having a good time. I know you got things to do. We all got work to do, but let's face it, it's January in Iowa. You know, all you farm people talking about you got to work hard. What are you talking about? The FSA office will be open tomorrow. You can go and sign up to get your free money from the FSA tomorrow. Anyway, let's have a good time and let's move on. Right now it says that Damian Mason raised his hand. I didn't raise my hand. Okay. While we're talking about government activism, this is something that's very, very obviously pertinent to you in Iowa. Activism. There's a very clear reason why I used a $ in activism. I believe that we in ag are such good, decent, working, productive, wholesome people that we have a hard time understanding what really is happening to us because we don't think this way. We don't think in terms of let's do radical and criminal things that not only are going to harm some other entity, but make us money in doing so. That's not how we do business, but it's how activist groups do business. I know about direct action everywhere coming to Iowa. They're relatively new to this whole game of radicalness. But we in the industry better understand that this is not just some vegan, wackos, because they are vegan wackos, but dig this. As Stalin called it, those that actually will protest on your behalf are kind of useful idiots. Those that are standing out there wrapped in saran wrap, holding their signs that meat is murder, standing outside of your hog facility, putting a person in a little pen saying, those gestation crates are terrible, a lot of farrowing crates. those are generally the useful idiots. The real control and the real movement is happening a layer or two above them, meaning the activist organization. PETA has over 300 employees. They take in about $50 million a year of donations. They spend that mostly on staff and activism. They bail out people that do criminal acts, that trespass onto your farms and let the pigs loose. Activism, though, is not just the activism. They use a willing media, because media loves controversy. Most of the media tends to lean a political direction that favors activism, and the activists can utilize the media to perpetuate and promote their cause and get fundraising for nothing. So when you think about it, they run ads, but the ads are against you. They don't run ads and just say, hey, give us money. They say, look at what those evil hog farmers are doing, and if you give us money, we'll keep this from happening. That's the concept. And they use a willing media to perpetuate their stuff. They show up with 14 useful idiots and their saran wraps and their their cleavers and whatever it is they do in their signs. Then they get media. But really understand that these are multinational businesses set up as non-for-profits. Humane Society of the United States and PETA are merely using you. Was the cause pure at one point? Maybe some vegetarian decided that they didn't like the way pigs were being raised. It might have been that, but then it becomes a business. Environmental Working Group, PETA, Humane Society of the United States, Direct Action Everywhere, Animal Liberation Front. And the thing is, they've gotten more and more radical because, frankly, it seems like this is acceptable to their base of donors. Trespassing, criminal behavior, vandalism. Unfortunately, I think they're going to continue to do this. The script works. Because of things like activism, I see more environmentalism. Now, we know that we take really good care of our stuff. Yes, Jamie pointed out the We Care program, sod waterways, buffer strips, no-till and reduced till. Those are all good things. But because of activism, painting a picture that we have an outsized impact on the environment, which of course we do because we control all of the acres that make the food. So of course we have more impact on the environment than a person with 1 acre of land. But we're going to see less chemistry and less fertilizer. Here's the good news. We already are using less chemistry and less fertilizer through things like drone technology and GPS and all these things. We're already putting less product on per acre. We'll continue to do that. When I look at the future, I see these things becoming more and more commonplace. We have lawsuits going on in North Carolina against hog producers, not really against hog producers, against Murphy Brown and part of Smithfield, right? And that was about a deep pockets thing. But what we saw is a strategy that seems to work. And unfortunately, it works against us. Trial lawyers work on a 1/3 basis, right? Hey, you slipped and fell. I'm an ambulance chaser. We'll sue somebody and I'll take 1/3 of what we get, 40% maybe. So if their business is lawsuits, which it is, they need more people to file lawsuits because that's their business, right? Enter activist groups like Environmental Working Group, who I continue to reference. They are the ones that told all the consumers that there was glyphosate in your kids' Lucky Charms. They're the group that told the consumer there's weed killer in your beer. Now, what do they get out of it? They scare the populace, get a bunch of free media, and then say, and those evil companies are putting weed killer in your food and beverage. If you give us money, we're keeping an eye on them. We're the watchdog. So they get donations and then they continue to hire people and put out more public relations. The trial lawyers and them team up. You've got a really magical organization there working, so we call it, in a symbiotic way, because now it's the old thing of 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, 1 + 1 = 10. Environmental Working Group tells everybody in North Carolina that hog farms are destroying your property, ruining your air, tainting the aquifer. Oh, and hey, here's this trial lawyer group that's going to put you all together in a class action suit, and we're going to teach those hog producers a lesson. And then, of course, they steal their money. That's what activism teaming up with trial lawyers looks like. I used the herbicide thing and the North Carolina thing as an example. You're going to see more of this. We'd like to believe that ag-friendly states like my home state of Indiana or Iowa will be reluctant or resistant to do this. But it happened in North Carolina, which is the number 2 hog state in the United States of America. Where do they start? Did they start out there in the actual ag area, or did they go to where there's a more, shall we say, left-leaning anti-ag sentiment? That's where they went. They went to Raleigh. They went to where the universities are. The herbicide people went to Northern California, specifically San Francisco. Is that a very ag-friendly area? Of course not. So these are things that we're going to see, unfortunately. And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and share this with you. What should we do? We should tell people, yep, there's herbicide in your beer. On a parts per trillion level, there's all kind of stuff in your beer. There's human feces and fingernails and insect parts. I mean, let's face it, on a parts per trillion, there's all kind of nasty stuff in your food and beverage. Doesn't make you sick because it's almost untraceable. It's just that we've gotten really good at testing. People said, what can we do about this? I said, turn it into a positive. What do you mean turn it into a positive? All right, 37 states allow you to smoke marijuana, but everybody requires you have a drug test. So here's what we do. You want to smoke weed and keep your job? Wash it down with a Miller Lite because it's got weed killer in it. I know you're laughing. I know that right now you're laughing, and I wish I could be there in real time to share that enjoyment with you in Des Moines. JB's question was about the sustainable. And we in ag have been hearing this for quite some time, but the reality is there is no definition. The USDA apparently does have a definition of local. If you want to sell your food as locally raised, it's got to be within 400 miles. Most of our consumers would not consider 400 miles to be local, but that's the definition. There is no definition for all natural. There is no definition for sustainable. So to our consumer, is it these 2 people that are out there in the nature, walking around with a hoe? Is that sustainable? Well, not really, because to feed 7.7 billion people, we need modern agricultural practices like the picture of the combines. Which is more sustainable? 3 hogs and a couple of panels under a piece of plywood out in Maine, which is where that picture came from, where they don't even really have enough crops to feed the hogs? Is that sustainable? Or is a modern hog production facility like you operate the more definition of sustainable? The reality is our consumer thinks that it's backyard pigs and 2 people with an arugula patch that's sustainable, but we know that the reality is with modern production methods comes less natural resource usage to produce pounds and bushels. We talk about sustainable. What about indoors? We went indoors to produce hogs 50, 60 years ago, right? Complete confinement facilities, manure pits, air handling, make it so those pigs in northern Iowa where it gets down to 14 below zero aren't freezing and they're actually still putting on growth. Some of our consumers don't like that. Livestock should be outside, should be free range. But what about lettuce? Lettuce isn't supposed to be free range. It's okay to raise that indoors. Indoor agriculture is a big new growth area. Indoor agriculture is getting a lot of financing from big tech and from startups and venture capital funds and hedge funds that believe by putting this sort of a facility next to the population center, now we have year-round lettuce in Des Moines, and we didn't have to truck it from Yuma, Arizona, a few hours from where I'm sitting right now. Sustainable is going to be an ongoing thing. Companies want to tout it, but it's probably better to not have it defined, because when something is defined, then you have standards to adhere to. When it's a marketing and an adjective phrase, when it's an adjective and a marketing phrase, it becomes a little bit more loose ball. When I look at the future, speaking of sustainable, when I said less farms, I'm talking about commodity production, big scale. I do see an absolute continual growth of niche and specialty farms. The marketplace has got more SKUs, those little things we more SKUs in the Kroger than have ever been there. More market categories, more products getting less facing, because now instead of 9 rows of, Ritz crackers, there's organically raised, fresh from the miller, crackers. These are things that are going to continue to happen. You know, I've shown this picture for the last 7 years of the sunshine or sadness. That hen has no emotions. The hen doesn't know what sunshine or sadness really means. That hen just knows it stood there for a picture, and a minute later, a hawk swooped out of a tree and killed it. That's what that hen knows. And yes, I'm going to go ahead and share it with y'all. There used to be just milk. Now there's all kinds of pretend milk, from rice to soy to almond to cashew to hemp milk. Hemp milk's a brilliant category. You drink the fluid, you smoke the carton. I know you're laughing. Okay. When I look at the future, I see things like adjectives being more and more an opportunity for us. Now, some of them are not as, shall we say, legit as others. Heirloom, yeah, that means that it's something that we used to do. Heritage breed. Again, I used Berkshire as an example. Any of you old hog types, you know why we got away from Berkshires a long time ago. But heritage breed, while there's no definition, there's really not a definition of heritage breed, is a term that sells. So Rhode Island Reds and Tamworths and Herefords and all these kinds of hogs and all these kinds of oddball chickens and, you know, Guernsey cows, which I can't imagine anybody's going to bring back Guernseys. I'm a dairy farm kid. Guernseys went extinct for a reason because they suck. So anyway, you're going to see some of these things, but also some that's actually more fundamental, like certified humane. If I were in the hog business, I would look at getting certification that proved how humane and well-treated my animals were, because I already shared it with you. It's going to move the needle, and the consumer will pay more for a product about animal care and environmentalism. By the way, I know we got hog people on this call. I'm just a farm boy who took some pigs in 4-H. But I don't know what those things are that are on the screen right now. It looks to me like a boar that was kind of amorous, had a couple too many drinks of hemp milk. A pin was left open. He got in with the ewes. I'm just saying it. It's a pig sheep. Okay. Everybody asks me, Damian, what's the deal on fake meat? You're a consumer guy. You're a marketplace guy. Are we going to see a proliferation of fake meat? My real prediction on this is not very soon. I'll tell you why. A consumer that's demanding more and more natural, how my food is raised. I want to go to Whole Foods and see pictures and imagery of nice looking farms. I want to know about my food. Do they really want the story to be, well, it was raised in a petri dish? Is petri dish protein? It's fake meat. It's the Impossible Burger, which is actually pea protein with some beet juice and some palm oil that we trucked over from Indonesia. Have you ever looked at how things are raised in Indonesia? So I think that we could market against this pretty effectively. If the pork industry wanted to hire me to be a spokesperson, marketer, and create ad campaigns, I would do so. And the first thing I would do is say, you talk about environmentalism. You know what? We can raise this wonderful product right here and use all of our resources right here in Iowa. You realize that your fake meat has palm oil in it that's trucked over from Indonesia? So I think this is going to be a struggle to get more than a few percent of the protein market. Right now, it's less than 1 or hovering around 1%, depending on whose data you come up with. Again, lots of tech money thrown at fake meat and Impossible Burger, Beyond Meat, all those companies, but they're not really selling all that well. Burger King got a big splash when they used it, and then they took it off the menu or reduced the price, or both, depending on location. We have seen this before, where there was a product that was better. It was healthy. It was the future. It was technology, from infant formula to egg beaters to knockoff milk and skim milk. But the consumer has gone back. Whole milk is actually gaining in consumption right now, whereas skim milk is not. Eggs are actually being consumed more than they were 20 years ago. Egg beaters are not being consumed as much as they were 20 or 30 years ago when the whole cholesterol scare was going on in the 80s and 90s. Infant formula. 86% of moms in the United States of America last year opted to breastfeed their child, not to use infant formula. These are all categories that came before that were supposed to be better because of processing, better because of our technology, and the consumer tended to go back to natural, and I think that's going to be our case with meat. Environmentally, there will be people that opt for the fake stuff and tell themselves an environmental story. Maybe humane treatment will be the other movement, but natural still seems to come out ahead when you use examples like this. Questions? I know we're running over time, but man, everybody keeps asking questions, and we're having a good time. And they, we still got 75 people on the call. They're having fun with us. You want to go ahead and take some questions now or later?
Up to you. We've got 3 in the queue.
Well, then let's take 3, because you know what? They stayed here for a reason.
How does rural America creatively recapture our political impact? We are being hijacked by the coastal states, celebrities, and their money.
Yeah, and I got in trouble on one of these calls last week because I was asked a political question. I gave a political comment, and I want to be really careful on this, because I don't want someone to call and complain to Jamie that I got political when I was asked a political question. I'm from Indiana. And obviously, Indiana and Iowa are pretty similar. It's just that we're smaller. We produce less of the ag stuff that you do, and we have more people. But we still don't really have a voice, as we know. And we're fighting a real uphill battle in this, because whether it's whichever direction you want to take it, right or left, the reality is when you've got the huge population in those states, and then you also have a very, very coastal media. So the coastal media, I'm convinced more and more that we have a media controlled country that the politicians just work with or react to. And, when you control the information, when you look at all the terrible things that have happened throughout history, because I love history, it was the information and control of information that actually dictated the outcome. And that's got me more concerned than anything, because we don't have a voice. We are flyover country. We are just a bunch of stupid hicks. I mean, we're a bunch of uneducated, stupid hicks out here in Iowa and Indiana, and we don't know any better. That's got me concerned because of the elitist and coastal media that actually I think might be our worst uphill battle in terms of the information. And obviously, there is a pressure being put on now to do away with electoral college, which if that happens, clearly the Iowas and the Indianas and the Wyomings and the Nebraskas are done having a voice. So let's hope that doesn't happen. What else?
In the vein of don't call and complain to Jamie about political questions, can you comment on your thoughts of $15 per hour minimum wage?
Well, it's going to be, first off, if you've taken economics, that's something I was good at. Price floors, price ceilings are attempts to circumvent the natural forces of supply and demand. There's a supply and a demand curve, and at the middle where those come together is the equilibrium point, which is the price, the market price, if you will. So when you look at New York City, which does rent control, what they're saying is you can't charge more than this for that apartment because there's a shortage for apartments. So what happens? Well, people work around. They go and bribe people or, give somebody a car to get an apartment. There's waiting lines. There's all sorts. Then they start doing interviews to see if you're worthy of being allowed to rent an apartment. And so then it puts in all of this sort of room for graft. So price floors, price ceilings, which is what a minimum wage is, it's a price floor, are an attempt to circumvent what the actual marketplace is. The marketplace would have the price be much lower than $15. So that just becomes the new beginning point. If the cheapest apartment is $1,000 or the most expensive is this, all of a sudden you just distorted the marketplace. So at worst, it's an attempt to change what is economically going to happen. But when it's put in place, everything goes up from there. If now it's $15 for you to do something like a $7 job, that means that everybody that was making $20 says, well, I guess it's time for me to double what I charge also, so I'm going to charge $40. So the price of everything goes up, and it tends to be inflationary. Obviously, when you keep increasing the price of inputs, there tends to be inflationary pressure on it. So that wasn't really political, that's economic. Although the unfortunate thing is most people tend to make minimum wage a political argument versus an economic one.
Let's go back a little bit to the sustainability piece. So what do you think the documentation or the auditing standpoint, what does it look like for producers as more companies implement standards for sustainability? Do you think something like the Common Swine Industry Audit will be enough, or is it going to be bigger than that?
Well, sustainability, I think that most of the stuff, and you guys are the producers and I'm not, most of it has been sort of voluntary, we care and all those sorts of things. And that's mostly been about animal treatment. Has it actually ever addressed usage of resources? Has it ever been, you can't be above, what's the conversion ratio on hogs right now? Like 3.5 pounds makes a pound of gain or something like that. So real sustainability would be, we're not going to reward producers who are inefficient with utilization of natural resources. So we are going to say for this hog facility, this many gallons of water and this many pounds of grain. That would be real sustainability. We've cut our usage of diesel, all the things that you really were talking about. It'd be usage of the resources and then converting that to what then amounts to pounds of gain. Will that happen? Well, look at what it's counterproductive to then what happens at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. When we threw out money, there was a $250,000 limit on per entity, which then means that if you gave $250,000 to a huge organization, that's a spit in the bucket. If you gave it to a smaller operator, that probably is less efficient because unfortunately, when it comes to production of things like milk and pork, usually smaller does production with more use of natural resources or pounds of grain or water or whatever. So it seems like if we're going to have real sustainability, it should be about utilization of the natural resources or the feed resources or the diesel resources or whatever those things are to get your output. And I don't know if that's going to be something that will be measured or worse yet, monitored and regulated.
That's all I have in the queue.
All right, let's keep moving forward because I know we're having a good time. I know we've lost some people. I know it's taken long, but like I said, it's January and it's crummy outside in Iowa right now. So let's just stay with us and have a good time. All right, a couple things when we talk about agriculture. I just want us to, again, talking about that consumer, especially the North American consumer. I know that we export a lot of our pork. That's something we did not do 20 years ago. My friend Dallas Hockman with the National Pork Producers Council made sure he told me all about that. I understand. I listen. And yes, I've got some friends here. What is it? Bill Even. I got buddies here in the pork business. We export pork. That's great. We've got to get past this mindset in agriculture about feed the world, feed the world, feed the world. And I'll tell you why. Other countries have learned how to produce food. And also this thing that we're going to continue to grow and have 11 billion people or 10 billion people on earth. It's probably not going to happen. Best example I can give you. Human population is already slowing down in all of the developed world. We have less people than we used to on a fertility rate and a birth rate. Countries like the United States, we're at 1.7. To keep even, you've got to have 2.1. So the only reason our country's population is growing is because of immigration. All of the developed world is at a negative birth rate right now. So the idea that we're going to have to feed 11 billion people is just kind of yesterday's slogan and mantra. The reality is I keep preaching the need for more value added because we're not going to see this happen. I see a future where marginal land, that which has a lot of highly erodible land, if it has a tremendous water need and it's in western Kansas and you're pumping out the Ogallala Aquifer to grow corn, why would you do that when we can grow all the corn we need in Iowa or Indiana? I see slopey land, I see marginal land, I see really dry land reverting to some crop that it can grow, grassland, rangeland for pasture-based livestock production or timber growth. This is going to happen because we can already be as productive as we need with the land that we have. So in the next 10 to 20 years, marginal land will revert. I see crops in the future that are not what we grow right now because there will be room for them. The consumer will want them and there will be demand for them. I always tell everybody, you think I'm crazy? Canola didn't exist when I was a kid. Canola was developed by two professors in the prairie provinces in the 1970s. They came up with canola because it was rapeseed and it had an acid problem. They reduced the acid. That's how it got its name. They said, we can't sell a product named rape. So they changed it to canola, which stands for Canadian oil low acid. We've seen new crops come about. We'll see this again. I hope that there's some new pork products that come out, some new take on pork. We're going to see more of this because, again, the marketplace will support it. Some of you that own a lot of land are going to start getting some other uses for your cropland. Some of your marginal land might get reverted and become carbon capture, which is a new hot thing. Every day in the Wall Street Journal, there's now talk about carbon legislation or companies being paid or paying farmers to capture carbon. These will be things that we see in the future. A couple things I want to cover. Ag after COVID. Real quickly. What did we learn from COVID? I had a podcast recording with Rob Brenneman where we talked about the supply chain disruptions because of COVID shutting down places with worker employees having illness. And we talked about the tightness of the supply chain because pork in particular does not have a lot of slack built in. I believe that we'll probably see some slack get built in because the government and the marketplace does not want to see a deal where there's a shortage of meat. Just in time manufacturing was amazing for Japanese car companies. It is not necessarily a good idea for the hog and food and beef industry and maybe even milk because we had to dump milk. So I think we're going to build more slack in. I know that costs more because it gets rid of efficiency, but I believe it's going to happen. We saw consumption patterns change fast. We saw things that restaurants closed. People didn't eat as much cheese. Why didn't they eat as much cheese? Because when you go to the Mexican restaurant, they put a pound of cheese on your nachos. You don't usually do that at home. Popcorn. Popcorn is consumed at sporting events and movie theaters. How much popcorn are you supposed to be eating right now? Oh, I have a bag once a week with my kids. That doesn't hold a candle to the movie theaters and sporting events. Lots of consumption patterns change fast. Will they change back is the question. Let's talk about meat. The last time that we saw meat consumption take a tumble was in 2008. Right now, we're at about 220 pounds of meat consumption per year per American, or we were last year. And this article says that this is out of the pig site, by the way, another little website I found and pulled up this article here, talked about how we saw about a 5% decrease in meat consumption last year. It's expected to come back. When we have disruptions, we do lose meat consumption, but usually it's from an economic standpoint. 2008 to 2014 is when we last saw a 20-pound decline in American meat consumption. We're back to 220 pounds. Trivia question now for anybody that stayed on. I should have done this when we had all 80 people. For a copy of my book, Food Fear, send me an email to Damian@DamianMason.com with your answer. I'll pull 2 people out that send me the right answer. What year was the last time pork consumption was under 50 pounds per American? The last time we consumed under 50 pounds. Right now we're around 52 to 53 per my research. The last year that we consumed less than 50 pounds was it 2011, 2008, or 2013? Woo. Send that to me, Damian@DamianMason.com, and I'll pull out 2 names and send you a copy of my book, Food Fear. It's my ag and food book. All right. One thing that COVID showed us is something that none of us wanted to see. Most of us remember as kids seeing imagery of what it looked like in communist countries or Venezuela, where there's no food on the shelves. You went there and you didn't see toilet paper, that scared you. Then you went there and you saw that they were fighting over meat. That got you really, really scared, didn't it? I don't think we're going to see much of that anymore. I hope that our industry learned, and I hope that we're going to build in a bit more slack. We had 13 days of meat in cold storage going into COVID. Is that going to be our new normal, or should we build in more supply? Something we should all be very, very proud of. We're all ag people. We love this industry. We're from this industry. We work in this industry. We should be very proud of how resilient we were, that we held up, that we bent, but we did not break. The good people of the Iowa pork producers, the good people of North American agriculture bent, but did not break. Again, national defense. None of us want to see people go hungry. None of us want to see our country be weakened. Be very proud of what we did and how this industry handled all of those problems that we were presented with out of our control because of COVID shutdowns, lockdowns, plant closures, etc. You're supposed to talk about China if you're an ag guy. So I just talked about China. Told you, send me an email. We can close with any last questions because I know if you stayed on, you're probably having a good time. I will pull out names of that when we do the question. I really appreciate Dr. Kelly Hogan with Boehringer Ingelheim and everybody paying for me to be a part of this. I would have loved to have been there in real time. Some of you already keep up with me on social media, so please do so. There's all my contact information. Do we have any more questions? Or are we going to go out clean here, Jamie?
No more questions in the queue,
Damian.
Is that my old buddy from Washington County?
You got it. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I hope you brought some of your staff in and are making them sit around and listen to this brilliance.
Yep. Hey, Prop 12. You didn't say anything about Prop 12.
I don't know a lot about Prop 12. Let me dig into it and I'll send you my thoughts on it.
Okay. All right.
See, you can always count on your buddy Rob Brenneman to come in at the last minute, ask you a stumper question, make you look silly in front of everybody after we had so much fun. Anyway, thank you, Rob. I'll look into that. I actually don't know. I've heard of it and I don't know enough about it. I like to, as you know, I like to do my research and view at least a few different sources to form my opinions. By the way, I did bring out a package of bacon. My wife said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I want to make sure these people know I'm all down with what they do. I'm going to hold up a little pound of bacon here to show them that I'm supporting their products." What I do out here in Arizona is go and shoot doves, then take the breasts out of the doves and wrap them in bacon and put them, and people say, "I don't know if I like dove." I said, it's basically a reason to eat grilled bacon, for crying out loud. Nobody shoots doves because they want to eat doves. You shoot doves because it's fun and it allows you to eat bacon. Anyway, keep up with me. I really appreciate you having me on here. I do hope that it was some relevant information that you can use. You know, it's my job to provide thought and forward outlook and big insights. And if you can just apply a little bit of this to your own business, you got your time and money's worth. So thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to have you stop sharing your screen, Damian, real quick, and we'll have Kelly close us out.
Yeah, thank you, Damian. That was a really great presentation. We want to remind you that the Iowa Pork Foundation Scholarship Auction, Dollars for Swine Scholars, is happening online now until Thursday evening at 8 p.m. The auction funds scholarships to support future professionals in the pork industry. Last year, the auction funded 23 scholarships. Help us support our youth through scholarships by supporting the auction. There are great items and opportunities for cash donation. For more information, go to iowapork.org and look for Dollars for Swine Scholars link. Buy 1, 2, 3, 4 items. There's no limit. Your dollars will make a difference. And a reminder to register for other educational seminars and swine product spotlights on the website. Thank you for joining the 49th Iowa Pork Congress, and please enjoy your day.